Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reflections of the Father's Heart. My guest today is a just beautiful woman inside and out. You're going to love hearing from her. She's got amazing testimony, amazing story. Her name is JoBeth Evans, and she's a certified grief recovery method specialist who I had the honor of actually training, though, to see where she's gone with this method is been incredible. Her story is incredible. She's incredible. So, JoBeth, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I thought, JoBeth, we'd just start. We were talking a little bit before we came on that we would start with a bit of your story. I feel like there's always a story that leads us to wanting to do work and great things and brings us to our why. So, will you fill us in on a bit of your story? What brought you here? What brought you to wanting to do heart work with people?
I think it's always been like kind of in my wheelhouse to work with people. I always found myself kind of gravitating towards people who needed help, but had never really felt like I had like walked the walk to be able to help people who are grieving. And so that all changed for me when my husband was diagnosed with brain cancer. And a lot of people, I mean, I think maybe that's a misconception that, the grief comes with death, but grief came with the diagnosis. It was just this immediate life that was taken from me, and from him and from our kids and from my family and his family. It was just this life that we thought was going to be, we knew was going to change for us, and we knew his life was going to end ultimately. We went into the emergency room and within an hour had a terminal diagnosis and was out the door, and sent back home to put on some kind of face for our kids. It's such a bizarre experience going from being like this family that's so functioning and good and everything seemed to be going our way to like, oh, one of us is leaving, you know? And I grieved that for a long time while still having hope. And then towards the end, he was sick for a year, and he was in hospice for a month. And I was just sitting there with my notebook, and I was like, okay, we have a couple of businesses. We have 120-acre cattle farm. We were homeschooling our kids at the time, and the kids were 7 and 11 at the time. Like, how do I do this? Like, how? Like, there has to be a manual. That's what I kept thinking. Because I was in this hospice place, and, everybody there is dying. And I was like, it was very surrounded by the fact that like people die all the time. Like this is part of life. But then it's like, even though that's an accepted part of life, there's like, what do we do with this? And I sit down, I wrote out a blueprint for myself in every area in my spiritual life, because I was really worried about that, Sandy. Like, I know so many people that they lose somebody and then they don't want anything to do with God anymore. Like there's a lot of hate and resentment towards God. And my prayer was always like, even sometimes even like it was like an affirmation, but it was always like, I'm right here no matter what. I'm not going anywhere. Like my commitment, like an affirmation to myself, because it is easy to stray away from that when somebody's taken from you. But what was the plan for my spiritual life? What was the plan for my financial life? What was I going to do health wise? Because I had a panic attack just a couple months after he got sick, and I thought I was having a heart attack, like, or a stroke. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dying. I'm dying. He's dying, and my kids won't have parents. That's what was going through my head. And I was like, after that moment, I realized like health was important to me before. But now that I'm like, okay, I'm all they have now. So I have to really have a plan in place, because it's really easy to let health go. It just, you eat whatever, don't work out, don't get enough sleep. So in all the areas of my life, I made a blueprint. And then I was like, if I get this figured out, if I can figure out how to do this, I'm going to help other people figure it out too. And so I hadn't found the grief recovery method yet, but kind of made my own plan that was a lot similar to what the program is. It's very in alignment for what I started out with. But then I was like, okay, I feel like I'm in stable enough of a place to actually help somebody else. And so that's when I found the grief recovery method. And what's weird and crazy, and I think unexpected a lot of times with the grief recovery method, is you think you're coming for one reason, and you realize when you get there, the pain's coming from somewhere else. And so that's kind of what I felt. I had a lot of peace with my husband's death. I had done all I could do. Everybody who knew him or knew of him had been praying for him. I had accepted it, that this was our reality. And so when I found the grief recovery method, I was like, I'm obviously going to work on my husband because that's the loss, that's my sadness. But when I got in there, I realized that there was a lot of sadness, and there'll always be sadness because I lost him. But the pain was coming from all the people that I had lost when I lost him. I would call them secondary losses, the people that you just lose when you lose a partner, when you lose your spouse, you lose people. And that's just kind of part of it. But that's kind of how I came to the grief recovery method. And obviously, a super tragic and sad story that led me there. But we also struggled with infertility, which is a big loss for a lot of people. And up until losing my husband, that was my biggest loss. It's that weird loss, that loss of something you never had. So it's not like, remember when I had, you don't get that. It's that loss of a dream and a hope. And I had experienced that 5 years before. And we adopted, obviously, because I just referenced my kids. So I did get to become a mom. But going through infertility was excruciating. And it's definitely a loss that's recognized.
Wow. Thank you for everything that you shared. I mean, even I really appreciated even what you said when you sat down and you wrote that plan and you just went, I was worried even spiritually because I knew that it would be really, really easy and understandable to have feelings toward God of why did you take this person, or why didn't you heal him, or why didn't you bring that hope? Like, it's those feelings make sense. And at the same time, to your point, a lot of times that causes people to just walk away and go, I'm done with all of this. And I just really, even what you said about your journey. And I guess one of the other things I wanted to ask you is, even when you were on that journey, or, after your husband died, do you feel like not only did you lose people, but do you feel like people around you didn't know what to say or how to help you, or maybe said a lot of things that weren't helpful? Did you experience that as well?
Yeah. So I live in a small community. And so it's very much like everybody knows everybody. A lot of people were really upset publicly. And so I would see them in public, and I would find myself like trying to console people because my husband died. And I know that seems like kind of odd, but they would be like, we just heard, and they would start crying. And I would be like, oh, it's okay. Like, cause I didn't know what to say. So I was like, it's okay. I'm doing great. Like, so that was weird. I also felt like walking into rooms, like I could almost feel them hush when I walked in. And I know it's an exaggeration, but my son plays basketball, and I would walk in and it would almost feel like everybody stopped talking. And of course they didn't, but like it almost felt like this, shh, she's here, kind of a moment. So yeah, I experienced that. People saying stuff, I don't know. I think I was just kind of like, I knew that everybody was saying stuff because they wanted to try to make me feel better. And so I didn't really have feelings about what people said. A lot of people were like, you're young, you'll marry again. And I'm just like, you just don't have any idea how irrelevant that feels when you just lost your partner. But yeah, people say all kinds of things. And with my clients, like, I think it just depends on where you're at, as how much it hurts you when people say stuff. But, especially when people tie it back to God, like God needed him more than you did. People say that a lot, or God needed another angel. And I'm like, wow, if you want to make somebody resent God, say that to them, that, he took them from you. And I was like, please, nobody ever say that to my children. Like, don't tell them that God needed him more than they did. But yeah, people, I feel like that's part of my personal mission is giving people a list of everything not to say. And I always say, like, if somebody's hurting and you want to say something to helpful to them, say, I love you. Can I bring you dinner Thursday? Like, that's the nicest thing you can say. You don't need to try to do anything. Just bring dinner.
I love that, and I appreciate what you're saying too, because I feel like when people say those things, to your point, sometimes there's a well-intention and awkwardness and not knowing what to say, or even, "Let me try to make this better." I feel like that's how people respond a lot of times to these big losses, is, "How do I make this person feel better?" versus, "How do I just be there and how do I hear their heart?" Right? Which is such a different piece. So I would say for anyone listening, just hear that, if you don't know what to say, don't think of, "How do I make this person feel better?" Don't be afraid of their hurt, don't be afraid of their heart. Just, I love what you said, "I love you, can I bring you dinner on Thursday?" Or, "Yeah, that's such a great thing." Or even just, "Hey, I just want you to know I can't even imagine. I'm here." Those kinds of things. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And the journey, it is such a journey. And it sounds like then with your husband, because we talk so much about grief, and then there's the unresolved grief, like the things that feel emotionally incomplete. It sounds like you did feel a bit more emotionally complete in terms of being able to talk with him and communicate things to him. But I really appreciated what you said about those other losses, the secondary losses, the people that you lost along the way. Was it just people that you were kind of in there with as a couple that you didn't have anymore, or people that didn't know what to do that kind of backed away? Were those
I'm gonna take like most of the responsibility for it, I guess, because like when you're a couple friend, like friends with another couple, and we had friends that would reach out and be like, hey, like, let's hang out, let's get together. And it's like, okay, you and your husband are going to hang out with me. Like, that's weird. We're not couple friends anymore. So there's that. But also, like, when you lose a partner, it changes every aspect of your life. I mean, it's everything, man. You're just not, you're an odd number now. Like, you're the odd one out. When you sit at a booth, one of the kids sits alone. It's like weird things like that, but also like just you lose the dynamic. You're not the same dynamic alone as you were together. And it's not always a bad thing necessarily, but it's different. And what I've found is that grief changes you, and sometimes it changes you for the negative, and sometimes it changes you for the positive. And the problem with both of those is that before grief, you were a person that some people really loved. They loved you as that person. And so when you change, that's hard for them because they loved the old you. And so there's just so many pieces to that of like why you lose people when you grieve or when you've lost somebody, because it changes you, changes the dynamic, it changes the number. It just everything changes, and some people stick with you through that. They're like, wow, you're growing and I like that. Like, they're in and some people are like, oh, you're really struggling, you're not the same as you were. They're concerned. But then, and especially with a lot of my clients, I've heard that like they're allowed a certain period of time to not be okay, that where their friends and family tolerate it and still hang out with them and still love them and support them. But then they reach that kind of cap where the family and friends are like, okay, you've grieved long enough. And so family and friends walk away for that reason too. And I haven't had that, but in part because of the Academy Award recovery that we talk about. I talk about this a lot in my groups, that I hated people walking up to me and being like, I am so sorry, and then just staring at me, because my heart was in 10,000 pieces, and I was at usually a ball game because my kids are in sports, trying to hold it together. And I found out real quick that the nicer like I looked, like is my hair fixed, do I have some makeup on, like do my clothes look nice, am I smiling, that people were less concerned about me, and they didn't do that as much. So people would be like, oh, she looks like she's doing great. Like she's doing great. Her husband just died, but she looks like she's doing great. But I found that like people left me alone a lot more when I did put on that front. And I am not a fake person. I've never been a fake person in my life. And it has been exhausting putting on that mask. I would get in my car and just be like, okay, you can just be normal. You feel like you however you want to feel. But yeah, I did that to keep people from just to avoid the sympathy and avoid those conversations. So I kind of went around your question a little bit, I think, but yeah.
No, you didn't at all. I think you brought up a couple of things. One is, and like you said, you've experienced this with clients as well, is this, there's the death, there's the planning for the funeral and, the memorial funeral, all those types of things. But then it's when your life goes back to what's supposed to be your life and everything's different. The normal that you had is completely different. And so you're also grieving the changes, all that change in the familiar, like everything is different. So, and like you, I've seen that too with clients as well, that it's like, yes, Sandy, there was this big event and there was this death and it was really painful, but then just navigating my life and everything changing and everything that I'd always known being so different, there was a lot of grief there. And that's not something that they're going to encounter or be done grieving, by the time the funeral's over. But it's almost like by that time, everybody's gone back into their lives and they're like, okay, everything's good. And a lot of times that's when the person, it's really hitting them. So, and I love what you said about Academy Award recovery, that, you know, we're going to act like we're okay. And one, because you didn't want to have those questions at the sports game, you wanted to just be able to try to like make it through. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, how long after that did you go to grief recovery, and how did you find it?
Well, I was just Google searching and I came across some programs and I was like, like, some were just like, weren't like, I guess, vibing with me. I was like, this isn't just exactly what I'm looking for. It was probably a year, a little over a year after he passed away, I think is when I took the course, which I realize is like I hate to even like say that because I don't want anybody comparing journeys. We are so different. That's hard. I get the question a lot, and I know you do too. Of like, should I still feel this way? Like it's been this long. Should I still feel this sad? Should I still be experiencing these things? And I feel like I moved through the grieving process pretty quick. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you lose a partner, especially to cancer, that's normally a slow thing, right? I knew what was coming for a year. It wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, oh, he's gone. I was sitting a year waiting because I knew what was coming. And so, I had already started the grieving process, like I mentioned earlier, before. And I think personality plays into that a lot because I was like, this is miserable. Like pure misery being in this, like, I don't know, man. It was like, I mean, what's the lack of hope? It's just like this dark space. There's I felt no hope. I felt no happiness. I mean, my heart was broken, of course, but like it was so much more than a broken heart. It was gosh, like a thief had stolen my life, but had left me enough things behind to stress me out and to keep me like juggling. It was terrible. And I was like, this is really terrible. And I'm going to get out of this as fast as possible. And so that's why I was set with my therapist because I was in therapy too. And I was like, okay, how do we expedite this? And she laughed, of course. She was like, you can't expedite this. And I was kind of like, watch me work. Because it wasn't that I wasn't honoring his life or that I wasn't totally sad or devastated, but I was looking at a life, the farm, my kids, being like, okay, girl, you can't drag this out. Like, this is just going to hurt you and them and everything else. But yeah, it was a little over a year when I came to the grief recovery method, and it was intense, which you were there, but it was just, I think it was so much everybody in that group. It was everything we needed, and it was not what we thought it was. We thought we were coming for somebody else. And in our group, a lot of therapists and stuff who were like there because for their clients, and then you saw walls come down. And it's like just such an amazing process, and exhausting too. It was a lot.
Most definitely. And you said something that I believe is so important for people to hear because when we talk about grief and grieving, it's like there's kind of these two components. There's presently, there might be this very real present experience that I have just experienced that is very painful, and I'm walking through that grief. And then oftentimes with loss, there can also be a host of unresolved grief, things that are just really emotionally incomplete. And unfortunately, the messaging that a lot of people get out there is just once you go through this major loss, your life is going to be less than forever, or just grab a silver lining and just, cling to whatever you can find to just try to make yourself happy. I feel like what you did, even when you talked to your therapist, was no, I'm going to walk through the pain of this present grieving experience. I'm not going to just grab a silver lining. I'm not going to just stay in the pain because we're not meant to do that either. So I hear with that present experience, you did some real active grieving, in the moment grieving, counter to kind of the messaging that's out there. And I
Hmm.
think there's power in that. But like you said, you then came to the method and realized I've got other places where I'm actually holding more unresolved pain than this because I've been actively grieving this. I did this as I knew it was coming, because some people hear a cancer diagnosis and they just put themselves on the back burner. They don't think about what life will look like after and just make it all about the person. And I understand that,
Hmm.
but it sounds like had more balance. And I think there's power in that. But like you said, you come to this place and go, oh, I have other places where there's a lot of pain that I'm carrying inside and I didn't even realize it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm not like I'm that's not an isolated situation, and you know that too, that like it is when we do some of the work, it's like, man, some of us have three, four things that it's like these are big losses, and there's very seldom a person who just has that one. But yeah, I was laser focused on the one. I was like, I've done this way, kind of why am I where's my pain at? And the grief recovery method does such a great job of exposing that. And even if you're sitting there and you're going like, how could somebody, how could a program or how could a book or whatever expose this like deep thing inside me? You'll be amazed. You'll be impressed with what comes out. It just does. That's how it's designed. And it's designed to do that. And it works, and it's amazing because we talk about having thorns in your feet or whatever as like an analogy, but like sometimes you have a pain and you don't know where it's coming from. You may know it's your foot, but you can't pinpoint where it's at. And the program does such a good job of just giving you the space and the education, and the support to discover that. And it's just so cool because there was no doubt in my mind when it came to the day where we picked our person, who I was doing.
Wow. I think that's such an incredible journey. And, like we were talking before we came on, you've done so much as a specialist already. Like you've definitely taken this and been like, okay, I'm really going to be out there and I'm going to really be going after supporting other people. And so I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that as well, of, what it's been like out there helping others as you've been a specialist, and like what are some of the things that you've seen and some of the things that you've connected with, because this topic is so important for people to hear when it comes to just grief and loss.
Yeah, so I've worked with a variety of people, which is what's another thing that's cool about the program is that it is everybody gets the same program, but everybody has a completely different experience. And so I see people that everything. So there's, child loss, spouse loss, health issues, God, had a lady do her work on God. There's so much, and it's so individualized, and people from all walks of life. Grief does not discriminate, and it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how broke you are. it will come for you at some point. Like it's coming. That's what I say. Like 100% of people have experienced grief. And if you think you haven't yet, you will. So maybe you're like, I haven't really experienced anything. You probably have, and you just you haven't really realized it yet. But if you haven't experienced something that you're like, oh, 100% that's grief, like it's coming for you. And I don't mean that in like a scary way, but it just is, it's part of our human experience. So the, my gosh, there's just so much. I always get excited, and that probably may look really weird to my clients, but they come in there sad and I'm like, let's go. Let's go. Like this is going to be so good. And I was so excited, and like I have to try to tone it down a little bit because like they're not excited. It's terrifying and they're scared and their hearts are broke, but I'm on the other side saying like no, there's hope. Like if there's anything I'm selling, it's hope. Like there, I don't know how that is going to like come to you and resonate with you throughout this 8 weeks, but it's going to. And it's just so exciting. We were not ever taught about grief. I don't know that it mattered. I've yet to have somebody who was like, whose parents or family handled it very well. You know, they brushed it under the rug or they beat around the bush about it. Like at hospice, a lady was telling me that they had told this little girl that the parents had told this little girl that grandpa's batteries ran out. They couldn't be truthful and straightforward about the experience. And so the little girl's like, why would we not just put batteries back in grandpa? And that seems so innocent, but why do we not talk about grief at a young age? Grandpa died, you know, use those words, let them express it in how, whatever way is, you know, obviously not a harm to themselves or others. But I just see a lot of grief that people just brush under the rug. And I was speaking with you earlier, but the most rewarding work I've done, not to discredit any of my other clients, because it is a, and you could say this too, it is a blessing to sit with each and every person. And I believe I will do it the rest of my life because this is about them. But I get to be kind of the vessel, I guess. I get to be the one who presents and sits with them and gives them a heart to speak to. But I'm currently working with a nonprofit, and we're working with people who have suffered from addiction. And they, to be a part of this program, they have to, you know, be on track and be, you know, moving in the right direction. But the reason they reached out to me, the reason they wanted me to come was one day they had asked a group of 20, I think it was, and they said, how many of you have relapsed because of grief or loss? 17 raised their hands. 17 out of 20 people raised their hands, and they started praying like, you know, this is, I love it. They started praying that we're in a small community. They started praying that, you know, like we need something for them to help them through this, you know. And I reached out to them a couple weeks later and was like, hey, like, is this something that might be relevant for you guys? And they were like, oh my gosh, like, yes, 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 yes. And I met with them, and I was like, okay, it's one of those places. And I hope everybody's had that experience where you walk in and you feel like you're home. It doesn't feel like you've never seen any of these people or this place before, but you walk in and like, it's almost like, you know, God is there, and, you know, you're with God's people and you're there where lives are being transformed. And I just was like, okay, I'm probably never leaving. I'm probably never leaving here. But so many amazing things are happening. So, I think that, and I don't know the statistics behind it, but I would say that grief, unresolved grief, addiction go pretty hand in hand. There, you know, there's a trauma that's unresolved and that they never get to process and grieve because they don't have the resources, and typically don't have like just the environment to go get that. So, I'm just sitting there presenting this information and loving them. You know, it's weird when they first came in, I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm probably going to tell them I love them. And I'm like, but that's going to be weird. So I'm just gonna make sure I feel it real strong before I start saying I love you to these people, but I already love them. Like I already love them so much. It is just phenomenal. I get a front row seat to watch them experience life and healing. And I mean, I'll sit there with tears in my eyes most weeks, just just moved not only by the power of the work we're doing, but the power of God in their lives. And I've grown up my entire life, and I hope it's okay to say this here, but small church, small community, but all the Christians I know look the same. Like they all look similar. They dress similar, similar hairstyles, similar vehicles, similar careers, similar family structures. I'm sitting across from this guy that is big and burly, and he's been there, done that, and he is like smiling, and he comes into class, and I was like, "How's your weekend?" And he was like, "We got baptized this weekend." And I would have loved to have seen him coming up out of that water, Sandy. And I could see him there, and the happiness and the joy of these people when they pull that away and they start working on their grief, and they get to see God, they get to see the truth. And we talked about that a little bit, but like when when you have all this stuff on you, the grief and maybe addiction or trauma, and that stuff melts away, the truth is there. And that may be the truth of who you really are. And that's what another one of my clients in that group, she said, "I always tell people I was born angry." And she was like, "But now I realize that I'm actually not an angry person, that I've just never learned to deal with my grief." And she's been had I mean, her childhood was hard and her adulthood was hard. And sitting across from me gets tears in her eyes and realizes that like she's actually not who she thought she was, that she's actually somebody way better. And I'm just like, man, I get the front row seat to this. Like it's just I don't know. It's just amazing. And to see these people, as they would say, have fallen from grace. They've fallen from God's grace. They'll tell me he's still there. He's still there. And they realize, and they're wanting to do better and live in alignment, and they are, and their lives are just blossoming. It's beautiful. But to get the front row seat to their healing and their relationship with God and their, sobriety, it's just a powerful room to be in. And, I wish everybody could experience it because it's just beautiful and it's humbling and it makes everything outside. I get real stressed out about the world. Like, it's not even about money, but paying bills and getting the kids to their practice and, making sure that everybody has, the right clothes and the clean clothes and the right lessons. We're hitting all the parties and making sure we're all the places. When you sit in a room like that, it all melts away. And you are there with people who are loving God and discovering who He is in the most purest form. It's just amazing. Like I hope I did a decent job at putting words to it, but it's just this feeling where you're like, okay, this is what matters. Nothing else matters. Nothing else. And it could make you go home and you love your people better because you're more in alignment with your soul, I guess. I don't know. That was a lot.
Very well said. That was amazing.
Mm,
It was amazing. And when people a lot of times think of loss, they think someone died. They think of your story, which is a tremendous loss story. But to your point, there's so many different other types of losses. And any of those losses, you're going to carry that, like you said, that unresolved pain around until you do something about it. And a lot of times in trying to deal with unresolved pain, people often are led to addiction. And I think sometimes there's even parts of the addiction or sobriety that end up even adding to the loss itself. And what I love about what you're leading people through is you're getting to the root, right? You're getting underneath the addicted behavior and going, let's look at what's going on inside, all the stuff you're carrying that you're trying to cope with by going to these other places, and they're in a sober place and they're ready to walk through that, but now they get to go all the way to the root and discover like the essence, like you said, of who they are. I think it's beautiful. And one of the things that was coming to mind, and I've said this before, but when you look in the Bible and you look at like the components of our being as people. I say this a lot, like, there's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? Our spirit is made anew, and then it's our heart, soul, mind, strength. Those are where sanctification happens. But I believe that the Bible really points to that the heart is what brings everything together. The heart is central. The heart is what the Holy Spirit really speaks to. And people will often say things like, "Well, I get it in my head, but I don't get it in my heart."
Mhm.
And when you look at the Bible, the word heart in some translations is listed almost 1,000 times, more than any other of our components of our being. So the heart is the most. And so there's value in the heart. And when people get to walk through that unresolved pain, like you said, they get to connect with the essence of, who was I created to be? Who am I? And that's where the power and the beauty is. And at the same time, if our heart is so central to our being, then if our heart is stopped up with unresolved pain, how can any of the rest of our life actually work well? It really can't.
Right. Yeah, and it's so guarded. When you were just saying that, it almost made me think of somebody who is like wearing a lot of Halloween costumes. And like you keep taking one off and there's another layer, and like finally you get down to who this person really is. Like, gosh, it's so amazing. And what a gift to give yourself, okay? Because this is not about me or you. And the work we do. We're just delivering it and loving people. But just like there's a lot of people out there that are grieving, and they've been through a lot of trauma, and they've been through a lot of loss. And I really feel like they owe it to themselves. Like, what's it worth to you to be who you really are, and to break free from the chains, to get down from all the layers, because it doesn't matter if you're 18 or if you're 80. Now's the time to do that. It's right now. It's the best time, and it's just such a beautiful gift that I think we all owe ourselves.
And something that you said is so pertinent as well. And I feel like you can really speak to this, even having gone through what you've been through, as well as when you walk with other people, because you said it, it's like when there's a lot of stuff in our heart, you're talking about people in addiction where it's so evident that, oh, they're using drugs and that's what they're going to. But so many of us, even if we're not using drugs, like I was somebody that did, I was a meth addict for 3.5 years, and I walked away from meth, but I was still distracting myself with a lot of other things, maybe healthier looking on the outside, but distractions nonetheless. When people we could spend our time, right, when we're carrying that stuff, like you said, even if I'm successful in the business world, or I get to impact a lot of people because I'm serving in ministry, at the end of the day, if I'm living in disconnection to myself, others, and even God, then I'm missing out what really matters, because at the end of our lives, none of the stuff matters. It doesn't really matter. None of that does.
No, and it doesn't feel good when you're living out of alignment. So, there's definitely a peace and a comfort that comes when you do get in alignment with what God created you to be.
And then your life comes from an overflow of that, versus I'm just on a, I don't know, like a hamster wheel trying to
Mhm.
make life work. And I have found, and I know you've seen this too, when I've sat with clients or people that have either that have been with people at the end of their life, or as in the trainings, I'll get hospice people in the trainings, or I'll get people that are even that walk with people when they're dying in the trainings, and that's what they will say. It's the connections that mattered to them at the end of their lives. It's not all the stuff. The stuff doesn't have the impact. It's the people, it's the connections. And so I just love that you embody that as a person. Like, you're so real and authentic, and I just love being with you, like, just as a person, but then that you bring that to the work, because you bring that as a specialist too. Like, this is an honor to sit with people, and I want to see them get through this, and I know they can. I think that's super beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, like I said, being on the other side of it. And that's too. It's just when you help people kind of cross over that bridge, it's just like yeah, it's amazing getting to see it and be a part of it. And and getting to be authentic. I mean, we're in a position where we can authentically sit with people. We don't have a lot of restraints, and we're very trained and very educated on what boundaries are and what to say and not say. But as far, I mean, we're like, if we want to cry with you, we can. Like it's like you got to keep your emotions together. Like, we don't do that. So it definitely sets us up, I think, to be more authentic than maybe other positions.
I totally agree. I totally agree. So I wanted to ask you, just as we're kind of starting to come in and close, there may be people listening who feel like their loss is too big. It's too big, and there's nothing that they can do about that, or that maybe things will never feel different. And I just wanted to ask what you would say to that person.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that a lot. Like people will be like, "Oh, you got your work cut out for you if you think you're going to help me." But I always wonder, like, I always ask them, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, if you dedicated 8 weeks, went all in, made some friends in this group, and put your effort in. You read the book, you did the work, you showed up. What's the worst that could happen? And there is no worst that could happen. I'm going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, you might be uncomfortable. I'm going to get nervous because I like sharing in front of people. Okay. Anything that's really, is there anything else like that could really be devastating to you if you tried this? Because 100% chance they're going to feel better by the end of the 8 weeks. And I would say 75% chance they're going to feel better after the first session. And I get that a lot. Messages that say, I felt hope for the first time tonight. It's hope. There's this glimmer. And if we can give people hope, then that gives them something to run with. But yeah, I mean, loss seems really, really big. And accepting, like, your life won't ever be the same again. Okay. But you're getting to completely rewrite your life. And I think that's true with anybody who's grieving is like, as adults, in most situations, we wake up every single day and we get to make the decision of what we do with our life. And you are the author of that and you get to decide. So, are you writing a story of grief and sadness and loss and despair, or are you writing a comeback story? That's what I would want to know from them.
I think that's amazing. And I have so loved talking with you today. There's so much that you said that is just golden. And so I just want anybody to know who's listening. First of all, share this podcast, share this with people. This isn't a topic that gets talked about nearly enough. People need to hear this. And the second thing I will say is I will have ways for you to connect with JoBeth. I'll make sure there's links there for you to be able to connect with her, with the work she does. She's incredible, as you can already tell. So I'll make sure that that's available also. And JoBeth, thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.